Brilliant.
Very good.
So at this point, I would like to invite Anne to read the land acknowledgement of Brock.
Thanks, Adriana. So Brock University acknowledges the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this is the gathering place and home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendships of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Anne. And acknowledging this collaboration, we also want to read the land acknowledgement of the University of Toronto. On your right, you see an image, an artistic interpretation of an island growing atop a turtle's back. And Rose, in a moment, will explain the significance of this. And I will pause and read our land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Rosa, why don't you tell us a little bit about why this image is important for you and for your students?
Sure, thank you. But thank you, Anne, thank you, Julia, and thank everyone, all of you, to join us this conversation. And this is truly conversation. So Anne's brilliant idea of putting in this dialogue format so that we can share, it's almost like inviting you to our very intimate and personal and wild and insightful conversation that Adriana and I have been having. The reason why I show this image in my first class, part of the first encounter that my students have when they come to my classroom, is that many of them are international students. So when they read this land acknowledgement, not all of them know what Turtle Island means. So I want them to read a text and ask questions, interesting questions, when they don't know anything, when they don't know something. And I want them to be able to feel comfortable enough to ask, what is Turtle Island? Okay, and don't assume that just because it's given to you in text, in words, that you just take it as a face value and you have to pretend that you know it all and we can go move on to the next one. So for that, setting the tone of the classroom, I show this image. Another reason, deeper and more philosophical reason why I love this image that I copied from the Canadian Encyclopedia website. We don't even know who's the illustrator, who's the artist, but it's because the images of a turtle island is very interesting. You see one foot is connected to the mass land underneath. So this is an island, but it's nothing is island. Everything is connected. We also see birds and fish. So more ancestral biological species, not human form, human life form on the island. We understand that the people are there because we see boats and we see airplane and we see air balloons, but we don't see people on the island. So it's both inviting to us for us to imagine our lives on this island, but at the same time feel enough humility and modesty to make sure feel that we're part of it, but we're not the center of it. So for all those reasons why I like to start my classes in the first class with this image and talking about this image and what it means for us. So we feel comfortable, but when we claim that this is our land, our classroom, it's not about just the ownership, the possession. The possessive adjective is not just used for the possession, but also used to feel belonging, to have that sense of belonging, and also the affection that we feel toward each other, but more importantly toward ourselves. Thank you, Adriana. So I think we are happy to have you and everybody feels connected to this space. I would like to start with a little icebreaker because like Adriana, you know some of the folks out there, but I don't know, so I would like to know them a little. Yeah. So the first question that I would like to ask you, and you can see that we are the teachers, so we are language teachers, so we always these icebreakers that our lesson plan, okay, we have everything connected to one learning outcome that we will achieve at the end of this meeting. Is I would like to ask you first, very simple question. What do you see out through the window? Take around your space. It could be out of your window or in your office, on the wall. Something that you note, something that you notice. And when you are ready, you can put that in the chat. It can be a car, it can be a tree, it can be your favorite mug or painting or some computer, whatever. So please start. Okay. I see snow on the ground. Please put that in the chat. Okay.
Julia's got snow at
No.
front of mind.
Okay. How about you, Adriana? What do you see? I'll put
I
the.
see the new case of my glasses. It's green
Oh.
and fuzzy.
Okay. How about you, Anne? What do you see?
I just
My
put
water
in the
bottle.
chat. I have this great Post-it note in front of me that says "You are enough."
That's wonderful.
That's wonderful. Love it. Okay, books. We see a picture of family. Oh, that's lovely. That's wonderful. Okay. It's important.
My
to
water bottle was second, and that's the other thing I had noticed as well, because that's a really important part of my daily routine. Carmela saying books, Elisa as well as commenting on sketchbooks and notebooks. Natalie is talking about her favorite coffee mug and water mug. I know I have those side by side as well, Natalie.
My physiotherapist said I should have my water cup very small so that every time I need to fill water cup, I have to stand up and I have to go fetch more water. They say keep your water bottle very small. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I think we can move on to the next part of this icebreaker. Now, I would like you to change a little bit, okay, ever so slightly, but you can also do dramatic change. Change your position. You can stand up, okay, or you can turn around. And from a different angle, please look at the item that you mentioned. So, and you will you will see your water bottle. Donna, you can take a look at your the picture of your family, okay? And Camellia, books and sketchbooks, and Natalie, your coffee mugs and water mugs. And could you tell us if you see something different? If you see something different, notice something different. I noticed that the cup that I had was my item. Because I changed my position, the light source changed. So it has a different hue. Okay, the blue is slightly lighter. How about you, Adriana? Did you notice something?
I did. I noticed that, yeah, it has like a little, my glasses case has a little goldeny spine. Makes it look, it reminds me of a scarf my mother had, that kind of green and gold that she would wear.
Okay.
Carmela sees the pages and that her water bottle is half full.
Not half full, not half empty.
I was about to say, I'm glad it wasn't half empty. But that's okay too. And if that's where you are, then that's okay too.
That's fine. Okay, that prompts you to go, okay, fill it up. So, okay, it leads to an action. So that's lovely. So basically, these activities, it's all about by changing, not drastic, dramatic change, but the slight movement of your angle, of your point of view, we see things differently. It's all about our positionality. It's all about our point of view, perspective, and the openness and the ability to change, this nimbleness too, and awareness of how our positionality changes the outcome and the vision. I think it's at the heart of language learning and teaching. And that's why language teaching and learning is so fabulous and amazing. How about you, Adriana? What would you like to say?
I was thinking, in terms of what you were saying before and this icebreaker, I just wanted to point out a few themes for our time together this morning and going into this afternoon is we want this to be a space of meditation and contemplation. We know how busy the lives of, of instructors, of faculty, and of all those that, help to make our spaces what they are for ourselves and our students. So we want this hour and a half to be a place of meditation and contemplation. We also want you to understand that there's a lot of intentionality. The things that Rosa and I do, the things we often talk about this with our colleagues, we want to meditate so that we can do things with intention and we can do things with a rationale. And that's where our learning outcomes and that assessment and alignment piece that we're going to be talking about is going to be very important. So that's another guiding point for us as well. And then the last thing that I was thinking, Rosa, in terms of I see and I get a sense we're all very experienced. Most of us have been here. We know what we're doing, and this is also a space for us to affirm, and hopefully you will as well, that you know what you're doing. Nothing drastic or dramatic has changed that has shifted your, that has invalidated rather the wealth and depth of your experiences. So this is also a space for us to affirm and for you to understand as well that you're doing exactly what you need to do. What we're going to offer today are some tips, some perspective changings, as Rosa has done in this particular icebreaker. We're just going to offer a space to shift our positionality a little bit so that we can make those changes, so that we can shift and adapt with the times, but we're not, advocating for any kind of major overhaul or change for a variety of reasons, which we're going to explain as well. So that's what I was thinking, Rosa. So thank you so much.
That's done so well. But I would also like to add meditation, reflections, that appreciation,
gratitude.
Yes. Appreciating not only our abilities and the wealth and depth that you explained, but also appreciation for our students, because they are the also important stakeholders in our interaction.
Exactly, and that's why we're here. And I think, for folks on the call, thank you so much for making the choice to spend your time with us this morning. Clearly, your students are important to you as our students are to us as well.
Excellent. So that leads to the next series of questions. So we prepared a very short survey because you're important.
We want to get to know you better here on the call. What are your thoughts and feelings? Rosa Hong and I have been talking for a month and a half, Rosa?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can go on. And now I love this conversation, but I would like to know a little more about Camilia's books and Natalia's water bottle.
We want to get to know more about you and where you are in this journey.
So if you can use that, again, device your cell phone to use the QR code, or there's a link. Okay.
Thank you, Anne.
And we're gonna play a quick music, and it's not to bother you or attract to take away your attention, but there's a reason why we will play this song, so that your question answering survey time is a little more enjoyable. So Adriana, if you could play it, okay.
Absolutely.
Maroon 5 to play Memories for us. Meanwhile, if you go on Slido, okay, take your time. You will see a series of questions. So we can show the questions. So the first question being, when you hear AI in higher education, what are your first reactions? The second question is a multiple choice. We love multiple choice. And what prompts you to join this conversation? This is a conversation once again. And the third question being alongside the discipline content. So you teach Spanish, Italian. In my case, I teach French. What core values that you want to instill in your students' learning? It could be curiosity, it could be patience, and so on and so forth. So let's play maybe, minutes of memories. While answering these questions. Thank you. If you have any technical issues, please.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Toast to the ones here today. Toast to the ones that we lost on the way. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories. And the memories bring back your. There's a time that I remember when I did not know no pain. When I believed in forever and everything would stay the same. Now my heart feel like December when somebody say your name. 'Cause I can't reach out to call you, but I know I will one day. Yeah. Everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday. Yeah, yeah. But everything gon' be alright. Gonna raise a glass and say, hey. Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not, 'cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been
I'm just
through.
going to step in and ask Rosa. I think you need to advance to the next question. I think there's only one question at a time showing.
Cause the drinks bring
That's what
back all the memories, and the memories bring back your.
Great.
Memories bring back.
Oh,
Oh.
my fault. Let's go back.
Let's go back. It's okay.
There we go.
Toast to the ones here today. Toast to the ones that we lost on the way. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back your. Memories bring back your. There's a time that I remember when I never felt so lost, and I felt all of the hatred was too powerful to stop. Now my heart feel like an ember, and it's lighting up the dark. I'll carry these torches for you, and you know I'll never drop. Yeah, everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday. Yeah, but everything gon' be alright. Gonna raise a glass and say, hey, here's to the ones that we got. Oh, cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Toast to the ones here today. Toast to the ones that we lost on the way. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back your. Memories bring back your. Ooh, yeah. Memories bring back your. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Memories bring back your.
I think we're done. 3 minutes up. Does everyone would
Wonderful.
to answer down the phone? If you don't, it's fine. Okay. So Adriana, can you show the images of the word crowd?
Yeah.
You can to the next one, next tab. Okay. Yeah, we see some. There we go. You can do a presentation. You can click on present underneath to have a bigger slide. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so opportunities, lovely. Okay, we have some smile. Oh, lovely, smile and wonder, large language model.
I love that opportunity is right there in the middle, Rosa. That really hopefully harnesses the very same thing that we're trying to do this morning. Yes.
And oh
But
God,
I still like the oh God one.
you see, oh God, I wonder who that will give that answer. Oh God, useful to lovely foreshadowing. Oh, okay, November 2020. Yes, I was there too. Okay, when that article in nursing came out, and
That's right.
it put us in that trauma sandwich. We just got out of, we were just dealing with the PTSD with the pandemic trauma, and then we have the, oh God, what's going to happen with this AI tool? So
Exactly.
as Adriana put it, we were caught in the middle of a trauma sandwich. How about the second
Yes.
poll? Can we go to the next one? Just click
Yes.
on that. Yeah, the forward, exactly. Okay. So everyone wanted to do everything. Okay, excellent. That's lovely. And hopefully we can answer, we can achieve the learning outcomes that you bring, learning goals that you bring with to this. And I guess didn't have time to answer. The third one is curiosity and caution. That's lovely. Thank you so much.
That's great.
So this allows us to think about what are your learning outcomes and how to achieve them, but also kind of where you sit in terms of AIs, okay, reactions. And this is wonderful for us to see that we see things okay, eye to eye, and the way that we got into this discussion conversation, okay, we share the same sentiments and emotions with you, that, oh God, the initial reaction.
Yes.
Okay. to turning into curiosity and starting to look at the opportunities in this new medium. I think we are in the same boat, similar boat, although not okay. We don't all have same boats. So the next slides, maybe we can talk about what it means, this opportunity. What does it mean, this technology? So please, Adriana, do you want to talk about what it means?
Absolutely. And the other thing I was thinking of in terms of the word cloud, Rosa, is, there's also an academic integrity piece. And I think this also speaks to our general anxiety or fears about any kind of new technology. And I think that's important to acknowledge and to understand. As you were saying, we're sort of moving from trauma trauma to trauma. We've all been through a lot collectively in terms of, our of what we do and the spaces that we inhabit. We've done our best for our students in the last 2-3 years in particular, and we want to continue. We want to continue to have that energy and that mindset, that growth mindset, not just as, again, for our students, but for ourselves as well. So we're going to address a little bit of that. We're going to talk about that academic integrity piece. But right now we want to consider, and again, pat ourselves on the back. I mean, we as second language practitioners, we are great, amazing at incorporating new technologies. In fact, we're almost always on the forefront. As you can see in the quote here on our collective screens to the top right, the quote reads, "It's in our DNA. Computers have been used for language teaching since the 1960s. And the image on the left is a black and white image taken from about the 1960s and what a typical language lab would look like, with students sitting at desks with dividers. They're all wearing headsets. To the left of them is a man sitting in front of a control panel wearing a headset. And again, this is one of the very earliest language labs. They were well suited to what you can see here as the audiolingual method. And by 1958, there were already, as you can read, over 300 language labs in the US, the majority of them being housed in post-secondary or higher education spaces. So again, as language teachers, we're used to this. We've been implementing or integrating technology from the very beginning. As you can see here, the very first recorded language lab, Rosa, was actually established as far back as 1908 in Grenoble with a phonograph of all things. So, there's something, and we talk about this quite a bit, there's something about language teaching. We know what it is. It's intimate, it's immediate, and that really aligns itself very well with new technologies. And so as language teachers, we've seen this evolution. We've been applying new technologies for a very long time. What makes this particular technology the same, first of all, is that, again, it's allowing our students to cut down on, some of the tasks that they feel that they can save time on. Okay, so in this call here, do we rush toward this technology or do we resist against it? What's the real cause of our reaction? And as we said, and we saw in some of your responses, we see opportunity, but there's also apprehension and there's fear. So as we gather our thoughts about how we feel about this technology, we wanted to take a moment to let you know what our students are feeling about the technology. And I'll begin by saying, well, November 2022, that wasn't very long ago. We don't actually have a tremendous amount of data just yet that allows us to say with any kind of, definitive authority or, really have statistically relevant or significant data that tells us what students are doing with it and why they're going to AI. As we move forward and we have more data, then we can make more evidence-based or make choices based on that. So it's okay if everyone is feeling, at the moment, we're just learning, right? And that's okay. That makes sense. That aligns with the fact that, again, we don't have a tremendous amount of data. But Rose and I did gather a couple of sources for you as we're in the early stages of this fact-finding mission. And there's a link here to a very short informal survey. And these are the kinds of anecdotal evidence that we have so far. And then Rosa will talk to us a little bit more about a more comprehensive study. At the moment, students see artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, anything of that sort as a time-saving measure. They see it primarily as a tool that they can use. They see, in fact, in that link, and thank you so much, Anne, for posting it in the chat, you'll see, or you can, there's a transcript as well to this very short podcast, that students call it a new calculator. or a new Google search. At the moment, they just see it as an extra tool in their arsenal that primarily allows them to save time. And that's really no different from any other tool at the moment. They don't really acknowledge any kind of implications or consequences. They're not terribly concerned about the academic integrity piece, and Rosa will talk a little bit more about this later on. The other element of the research or the feedback that we're getting at this point is that students feel that they need to use AI because they're looking ahead, they're looking at their potential future in the workforce, and they're noticing that they need to be AI literate. And because they perceive post-secondary spaces as a place to experiment and learn, they feel that this is the right space in which to do so. Okay, and that's a really important framework for us. So students are experimenting with this technology in the space where they feel that they should be experimenting with technology. And again, that aligns very much with the learning goals of all our institutions, a place for students to learn and grow. So they're doing it in that context. And again, what they don't understand or what they're not really looking at just yet, that we as instructors, always forward thinking, what the implications are, right? What the consequences are. How does that, and in particular for our time together, how does that affect the way we construct assessments? Okay, so again, just a little bit of idea of where our students are. And now Rose is going to talk to us about this incredible study that she found, which I think is the first of its kind, Rose. I don't think that we have anything that looks at.
Yeah, I had a hard time looking through and finding an article, finding a study that will show. It doesn't show very well on the chat, but the reference is there.
Right.
What's out there? It's abundant. Which you go Array, go Google Scholar, or your library database, you will see abundant number of new studies and articles and proposals and guidelines related to AI integration in our curricular design and assessment design. However, very few on how students actually live and experience these integrations and these
Right.
tools, these measures. So I searched up a little, quite a bit, and it's a recent one that just got published only a couple of months ago on exploring artificial intelligence in essay writing. And what was interesting for me is these 245 Indonesian higher education students are all in languages. So they are in Indonesian language, English language, German language. So very relatable to our students, yet, okay, a little way disclaimer, this is not a North American study. So there are cultural differences that we need to incorporate.
And we anticipate that to change, Rose. And we understand that, yeah, that research will start to become available. But this is sort of just to give us a sense of what we're starting to hear back from this.
Absolutely. So if you go to the next slides, the audience will be able to see just the quick data forms and the screenshots of the graph. What you see on the left-hand side is why students think students prefer using AI. Why do they use it? What are the benefits and advantages of using AI in their essay writing as a supplementary and helpful tool? So they use it because it enhances article quality by spotting flaws. So this is definitely a secondary tool to perfect. So that sense of mastery, sense of perfection. So somehow they feel like their articles or their essays need to be perfect. So they prefer using this tool, and that they see the benefits of AIs. While what's more interesting for me, at least for me, and in this context, was the right graph that shows why students, all these 245 students, equally divided, men and women, okay, in the ages, prefer not to use AI in their essay writing. And what they say, and let me read these the reasons why they prefer avoiding AI use in their essay writing. I think these are very telling for us. This is a kind of entry point where we can think about, okay, what are the shortcomings? What are the shortfalls of this AI for our students, and where we can compensate by bringing our expertise and the large data that we bring in when we make our curricular design. And the first one being a lack of originality and innovation. That's interesting. Originality and innovation. They feel that innovation is important and originality is important. important in their essays. Critical thinking skills are limited. They already know that this ChatGPT or OpenAI AI tools, we can really go for the critical thinking or problem solving. What makes language learning important, not only for the content delivery, but also other skill set and the competencies that they learn from being a language learner. Over reliance on technology, this is an interesting. They don't want to use technology that much, and the misinformation, inaccuracy. What's interesting for me was the fifth one, concerns about plagiarism's ethical implementation. For them, this is not a top priority. This is very interesting because they know by that by just doing their work on their own, that they can avoid it. They can avoid plagiarism. They can avoid. So students are very smart. And hopefully this is also the same the case for our studies in Canadian context and Canadian universities. Difficulties with difficult subject. This is the most important thing. I'm going to come back to this one for us. Customization choices are limited. Inadvertent prejudice in material state. So they heard about the equity issues. They already are aware of those biases. And the last one, the adjustment take time. So, okay, well, they don't want to invest their time on working on these tools, okay, and they know that they already know that they can invest their time and energy in actually writing their works on their own. The next slide shows how we integrated this. So what we found in our findings. In the first question and also third question, you talked about some of the values you wanted to talk about. You talked about curiosities and openness. And Adriana and I, we had the same conversation. So for instance, for me, I want my students to not only the content, but also other things about language learning. Meaning, I want them to be patient about them of their own learning. I want them to understand that the language learning takes time. So these are the secondary yet core value that figure in our learning outcomes, but not necessarily translate into the assessment. So how do I make sure that my assessment can really integrate based on these core values? What do we want and how do we do to make sure that these are integrated in our curriculum design? I make sure that all my assessments are scaffolded, for instance, okay, to show the process. The process is as important as the performance and result. For instance, there are low-stake quizzes that are double, so we do double dipping, so that they do the first one on their own and then second one with their peers, and some sort of a negotiation happen in terms of gradings. Their formative assessment, and we can also drop one lowest quiz and summative assessment. And the second one being, we want them to be exposed to the world. And I hate using word the real world outside, because as if they connotes that my classroom is not real enough. But we also know that it's important that students are measure up to world readiness assessment that we use from we know from the OCTFL, for instance, 5 C-based tasks: communication, connections, and culture, and so on. How about you, Adriana? What's important for you?
And certainly, yeah, I mean, and all of us, I think, would agree that language learning, as you said, takes time. So if language learning takes time and we privilege the process, then, as you said, our assignments have to reflect that methodology as well. So in terms of, as you said, scaffolding, creating low stakes activities, things that show that we understand what the process is for you, right? So we're not going to give you an assignment that's worth 70%, right? We're not going to privilege the final product, but we're going to show you we're going to privilege the process of learning. So that can take a variety of forms, as Rosa says. It can be, small assignments. It can also be a lot of in-class conversations, that spontaneity that you're hoping, that you want your students to come to class, because that's where the learning is going to begin. And then we work outwards, right? So we're constantly negotiating differentiating between what's happening inside the classroom, what we're expecting our students to do outside of the classroom, and how that connects to assessments. So providing a roadmap, really clear guidelines and expectations for our students, where, as Rosa again is saying, we are the curators of them for that space. That's something that our students, and particularly this generation, really prizes and privileges. They themselves are, you know, content editors by extraordinaire, by exemplar. So they really recognize that level of skill as well. So they will, you know, they will appreciate what you do in your classroom to curate that content for them. So again, if you are transparent, right? If you offer those clear guidelines and expectations, then your students will follow. The other thing that struck me while you were talking, and we saw it in our survey as well, is that curiosity, that passion. And one of the things that I think is incredibly important for us to do, as you can see here, is those authentic connections to their own life, something that only that particular student can know. That's meaningful for them, right? Language learning is an incredibly intimate and immediately connective process. I mean, you're talking about the ability to express yourself, right? One of the things that I like to do is at the onset of any language course, I like to ask students, why is it that they're taking a class? You know, sometimes I will hear from students who are trying to connect with a parent or a grandparent, so there's a cultural or heritage connection, and they want to learn how, you know, to make pasta with nonna, you know, and they want to understand the little nuances. You know, others potentially are traveling to Italy, you know, their parents, or they're traveling in a larger group, and they've said, you know, you're going to, since you're taking, you know, Italian, beginner Italian, you're going to be the person that books all of the Airbnbs for us. So, you know, they've taken that on as a role. And so that's what they're looking to gain from the class. Of course, all of these dovetail nicely into, you know, a communicative and transparent approach, but I allow that kind of, you know, personal outcome for them inform some of the in-class activities that I do as well. And then I invite students to share as well, as much as they feel comfortable about where they feel they are with their learning outcome. I might say, Rosa, do you think you're ready to make ravioli with your nonna next weekend based on what we learned today? You know, and sì, certo, you know, or, you know, do you feel, Anne, that you're ready to take that trip to France, you know, with your chat? And so trying to make that those personal and immediate spaces that, again, there's no amount of AI that can do that. So what we're reinforcing is design, intentionality, you know, really effective, basic core pedagogical practices that will help to make your classroom the exclusive space, the wonderful inclusive space that it is, and that, you know, those who gain admittance to it are really in a privileged but accepted position. Okay, so that's one of the things that, and I won't say more, I know we have other things going on, but that's sort of the bit of the connective tissue that I wanted to point out in terms of, you know, how do we make sure that our spaces are for our students.
So if we can go back a bit, because that reminds me of one of my students, the best learning outcomes that he proposed was the bragging right. I want to brag
that means.
French, and I think that was one of the best learning outcomes. And in terms of that bragging right, I think we also don't forget the disciplinary knowledge being the core part of the core values we want to share. So because although we want to be extremely creative, imaginative, and avant-garde, and innovative in our assessment, we also privilege the previous experience and knowledge that students bring to our classroom in terms of, yes, absolutely, in terms of a test and exams and oral presentations, all the assessment, that the practice that and tradition that we carry, because they are important also in their students' learning experience. But what we want to try to do is being creative and imaginative in that, using those traditional framework. Thank you. So then next slide is let's go. How can we be more creative using AI that are available to us? So here's something, some of the topics that we discussed, Adriana and I. So Adriana, do you want to share what we had discussion?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is important for us to understand, again, in terms of our own strengths and the positions that we come from, is that AI falls short in a variety of ways. We understand that artificial intelligence somehow tries to mimic the human data processing operations. So, prior to AI, we would have Google, you would put a topic in and, a series of website hits. What AI does, or what ChatGPT does, is it cuts out that middle operation. So it no longer simply gives you a list of resources, it collates those resources for you in a discernible final product. And one of the things that we've realized in this very early stage of this particular technology, and thank you so much, Rosa, for bringing this quote to my attention, the idea that what we're getting back with ChatGPT, right? What's the quality of what we're getting back? At the moment, as we sit here today, it's very much a blurry JPEG of what the web has to offer, right? What we're lacking is it's at best, it's an approximation of the information, okay? It looks like it's giving you back a complete essay, let's say, on whether Dante really did go to, through the Inferno, right? It looks like it's giving you a complete essay. But at best, when we dig deep, what we find is that just because it looks like a complete grammatical text or an essay doesn't mean it is. At the moment, I think that image of a blurry GPT, and thank you so much for popping that source from the New Yorker into the chat, I think that's the best that we can say about the quality that we're getting back. Another opportunity for you and your students to test ChatGPT, if this works in your classrooms, is to ask it something that you know really well.
Absolutely.
When you put something in that prompt that you know really well, right away, all of these shortcomings that you see on the screen pop out at you very glaringly. It does terrible with knowledge, or novel rather, and interdisciplinary topics. It's generally lacks a tremendous amount of creativity. The new material that Rosa found 2-3 days ago, that is not available yet on ChatGPT. It's only, I think the last update was March 14th of 2023. So you're missing a huge amount of new ideas. And so it's important also for our own perceptions to understand its limitations, okay? And I think that also brings into sharper relief what our learning outcomes are. If we understand what ChatGPT can't do, or quite frankly, what it does poorly, then it also helps us to see what we do really well and go in that direction, move our learning outcomes and move our assessments in directions that we know that this particular tool falls incredibly short. And to show students that, you can have a little activity in your classroom where, again, you give it a prompt of something that, let's say, the students would know really well, and right away, all of these shortcomings come to the fore. So it's a great modeling activity to do as well. And of course, you can do it beforehand. You can assign it as, let's say, an introductory discussion post to a lesson. So there are a variety of ways for students to see for themselves the limitations, or the what we're calling at the moment shortfalls of this particular technology. Oh yes, and topics that only you and your students share. This is, again, ChatGPT. One of the very first questions, Rosa, that I asked ChatGPT is, tell me a little bit about yourself. And it's amazing. I knew Anne would like that, what it came up with. But then I said that my second question is, what don't you do? Okay. And it gave me a list. It has no emotions, no feelings, no experiences. I mean, we can talk about the validity of that because it's collating the collective experience of, everything that it's available to it. But what it doesn't have is, of course, the personal student experience, right? The experiences that students share. And one of the very first pieces of connection that your students have is a couple of them. But the first one is that they're all in your class together. So again, they're in this space that you've brought together, and that they're all sharing, they're all students in this case at Brock, right? They all have that communal experience of being registered at the university in your particular course. And I loved, Rosa, how you used that information to curate an assignment that was called the UTM food map. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what that looked and felt like for your students. So
UTM food map, as much as the UTM food situation is not
sure. This is not an endorsement.
So that's,
yes,
that's aside. That's a discussion aside.
We don't know what the food situation. Well, I don't know what the food situation is like at Brock, but ours,
I know that
it leaves us wanting more. But yes,
but I'm sure this is a very similar experience that your students at Brock share, and any other institution will share. So it's just a writing assignment that I taught about, for instance, the positive articles like usually we do in creating recipes. And so those canonic style of teaching, the effective teaching of certain elements, grammatical element and syntactic structures. But what makes it a little more interesting, because the positive emotions are important, but the negative emotions are also important, because at the end of the day, language learning needs to go through bodily, physical, corporal experience. You have to feel joy, but you also feel frustration. So I use this intentional topic and theme of, okay, there's a new student joining us, joining our classroom, and this student has no understanding of what is available in terms of the food maps and foods available on campus. So you as a team come up with the good advice and what to avoid and what to take, and in terms of UTM food map. And so the first section is advice that you will give as a general advice, and then I'll throw in a little bit of a twist, and each group has a specific condition. So one of condition they need to incorporate is that this student it's vegan, for instance. So you can select, you have to give her ideas of where she can get the vegan food. The second condition being you need to be very economical because she doesn't have a lot of money. The third one is, she can only take halal food. They're allergic, she's allergic to certain food, and she's for instance, that sort of conditions to make it a little more complicated, complex. So at the end of the day, we test, we measure not only the spontaneity and the accuracy, but also the complexity, because it has many minefields that they need to navigate through. So this is one of the ways that using the traditional type of an assessment and throw in something more personal and purposeful and meaningful and authentic, so that utilizing these AI tools are limited to the level of secondary resources, but you can now put that. And if you ask a ChatGPT to come up with the UTM food map, the answer is going to be, what are you talking about? I don't understand that, the prompt. So that leads to how can we use these available AI tools to enhance language learning. So there are a number of advices and strategies and tips that we can share. So for instance, AI tools to enhance language learning, we have language learning apps and chatbots and pronunciation feedback, writing assistance, language translation activities. The next slide has the rest of the list, so we can go on, we can continue. So these are the tools also. So interactive language labs, virtual reality language immersion, AI enhanced language assessment, so on and so forth. So when we use this AI to enhance our language learning, how about the potential danger that I think everyone can share this trepidation? What if students, because we open the can of worms now, and students feel permitted to use AI in their production, in their assessment? What do we do? So potential indicators to dictate student works generated using AI tools. And there are a number of cues and number of indications that we can utilize to make filter out what kind of work, what works, whose works filter through AIs. And for instance, there are generic responses, of course, because this is from a data bank, so there's nothing personal, nothing intimate about their answers. Consistent writing style, unusually advanced, like very 19th century vocabulary that nobody uses anymore. Okay, so for instance, in French, simple future, simple past, all of a sudden everything is in simple past. So like, I haven't taught this. How come you know how to use it?
I don't know what students do with the passato remoto. I'm sure Carmela on the call here, she knows as well. There's this fascination with this tense that they haven't learned. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the subjunctive is flawless. How come? How is that? Okay. So these are some strategies that we can use to detect and advise students and allow us to advise the students. Unless you know. That's
exactly. Then it's all you know, right? Manjai, manjam.
So that's topic itself for an oral presentation on assessment. So next page, next slides, we share some strategies and tips about assessment to minimize the potential use of AI tools. So these are some of the assessments that we can incorporate in our curricular design. They would limit, they will impede, they would stop students, prohibit students to use AI tools in their works and tasks and productions. So oral interview, role play, written essays, reading comprehensions, listening comprehension. It looks very similar to my curriculum, my syllabus 20 years ago or 25 years ago. So I don't see a lot of advancement. And the next slide shows the rest of additional advices or additional tips. Thank you, Adriana, for advancing to next one, additional tips. So peer interviews, translation exercise. Okay, guess what? These are all strategies and tips provided by ChatGPT. So
all of this you had put into ChatGPT, and this is what it came out, what it collated for you.
So these are the answers that ChatGPT gave me last year, November 15, when I entered these prompts.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you click the last one, so these additional tips are from last week. So what it shows is that ChatGPT is evolving, yet it draws its inspiration from our own practices. As we saw, there's nothing new that ChatGPT can invent. Going a little bit back, going back a little bit to we can stay here,
Sure.
But what we discuss in terms of the shortfalls, but at the same time, what ChatGPT or other AI tools can help us is we talked about where we lack in large data. Since we understand that these AI tools mimic our operational process. So when we come up with our assessment, what do? In fact, we do what ChatGPT or other AI tool do. Okay, we have large pool of data. We go through those data and we select the most pertinent set of questions and assignments given the context, given the student settings and environment in which we find ourselves. What it means is, I realized, thinking through that, I realized where I lack in assessment design is when I'm dealing with students, for instance, the neurodivergent students, how to come up with good assignments for some students having some sort of a learning disabilities. I might be very good at coming up with the final test within an hour, very comprehensive ones. But since I lack in history and experience and expertise in how to come up with a good and very optimal and efficient assessments series for students having some sort of a learning disability issues or learning ability issues or social anxiety issues, then I borrowed this large data set, the data pool that these AI tools possess, so that I can go for inspirations where I lack in those informations and expertise. So that can be another way of keeping these AI mediums as the auxiliary tool in enhancing our students' learning experience and facilitating the more effective and efficient curricular design. Thank you, Adriana. Maybe we can go to, so what do we do? In fact, if we don't want to do all these things, and we know we can do all these things, and ChatGPT will only generate or AI will only generate what we've been doing for last centuries and centuries of language teaching, second language teaching. So we want to bring back some of the samples that we talked about. So this is kind of this will inform our assessment design. But the next slides will go a little more details about sharing some of the samples that we actually included in our curriculum designs. So for instance, to make it purposeful, meaningful, authentic, and intimate, I use one of the methodology, for instance, the story exchange methodology. Story exchange is based on storytelling. So students will bring their stories, they will exchange their stories, and we have another step where they will have to mediate the partner's story. So Adriana and I will be paired up. I'll tell Adriana my story. Adriana will tell me my story. So there's a storytelling component. There's a deep listening component. And when we're done with that storytelling part, we come back to the large circle, and I have to tell Adriana the story as if I am Adriana. I can walk in her shoes, and Adriana will tell my story using the first person pronouns. So, hi, my name is Adriana. This is my story of teaching Italian at UTM and Brock. Same. So this is where I can target listening, speaking, writing. There's a listening. So instead of listening, it should be reading. And why we have listening, reading. Okay, to show that this.
We have it twice. Yes.
Exactly.
Unconsciously, we want. So
Yeah,
you want to want you to listen
listening.
twice as much.
Exactly.
Yes, we'll call that an intentional mistake, Rosa.
Exactly. The mediation activities, and the second activities, and this is based on Narrative 4. This is on the nonprofit organization that I take part in for a number of years. This is kind of my social activism that I do to foster empathy in educational settings. Another example of that, if we post a presentation, I believe in the difficulty of multimodal and multisensorial works. So switching from verbal to graph, the visual to verbal, very difficult. This takes the higher order thinking. So for instance, before the class, when the semester starts, ask them to do a poster presentation. It's like a poster presentation, imagery and pictures, collage of pictures. The pre-course. So for instance, who are you? Do a representation of you as a language learner, linguistic profile done in visual format. And then at the end of the year, okay, they do another one. So they present both posters and explain the transformation that occur. Again, what kind of elements that trigger these transformational changes. And if there's no change, then why there's no change? What didn't you learn? Why? What happened? So that okay, it wasn't really transformational in terms of participation in the course. The third element that we can also use is the oral production, of course, but it's not just oral production, oral presentation. I'm done with the presentation on La Tour Eiffel. And okay, some of these singers that I can't stand anymore because I have heard so much about this singer. So what I prefer
So
doing.
if I were to do a presentation of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, Rosa, you wouldn't be happy with this anymore.
No, because I want to hear about your experience. How
very good.
What was it? What did you eat? How hot was it when you went there, sort of thing as well. So I want their presentations to be about their experience, their encounter, their interaction, their feelings and their learning, their memories. So something like a walk in your neighborhood. Okay, take your smartphone and film 3 minutes walk and showing this house and this is a park, this is dog, this is my dog. Okay, something about themselves. And I'd rather make them do this video rather than a presentation on okay, Eiffel Tower that they never visited. The reason why is a little bit of kind of self-centered reason. I prefer grading these works than give those Eiffel Tower presentation. Once again, I'm done with when it was constructed and who was the architect and all those the Googleable, the Wikipedia-based information. Another production that I do is based on my app, AudioStat, Aiming Accuracy, and I also make the interview. But in terms of just the regular interview, element, gamify these interviews or any kind of assignment. So it's not just a normal interview, but an interview where interviewee, the famous person identity is now revealed. So the class has to find out based on the information within the interview, okay, to find out who that interviewee was, who's the famous person that the journalist interviewed. And the next one is related to comic strip, meme creation, graphic to verbal sort of thing. Once again, based on game-based language learning, gamification with the description activities. I think, Adriana, you had some other interesting ones that you added.
Yeah, I wanted to start off by going back to that UTM food map that you mentioned. One of the things, and I think it's really important for us to look at, make that distinction between, we're looking to create communities, we're looking at the creativity through which the assessments can run. But at the end of the day, we recognize that there's a canon that they need to, there's a series of skills or knowledge content that they need to acquire. So thinking of your UTM food map, once you have an outline for an activity, again, that hits all those markers, you can funnel that activity or turn the positionality of activity to work for whatever you need it to. For example, when you were talking, Rosa, I thought this is a great activity to get students to use l'imperativo, right? So you can ask them to give direction to the student, in terms of if they're vegan, if they're looking at budget, right? So you can use that activity to study the imperativo and knowledge production in that area. You could turn your positionality slightly and say, tell me a story, like you've already walked through with them. So then the activity then becomes passé composé or passato prossimo. Okay, so you don't need to come up with we don't want to add to your cognitive load of having to come up with 12, 13, 15 different activities. You can find activities that hit the markers and then change them, right? Move that positionality slightly so that it works for what you're doing. Exactly. And your rubrics should also be that flexible as well. So if you are planning, let's say, a project like Rosa has outlined, you can scaffold that activity a little bit throughout in the weeks or days preceding, when that assignment is due, and you all together talk about how terrible the salad is at whatnot. I can't remember now. But you can, and show them and model that behavior, and then, show them a bit about the rubric, right? What is it that I'm looking for? The verb is correct, the context is correct, and then you have a model for the rubric that you can adapt and use as necessary. So it's also about, being empathetic and kind and mindful of your own time and your own commitment. The last thing I wanted to highlight here on the slide is, multiple choice, true or false, fill in the blanks, but adding a critical thinking component to them. I mean, these are obviously very helpful tools with which to ask students to demonstrate that they have that knowledge, right? But we're asking potentially to go to one step further. Instead of having 10 questions on the multiple choice where we vary, in this case, the direct object pronoun. You see here that it's feminine and singular, whether the example is in Italian or French. Io mangio la mela, je mange la pomme. Then they're replacing the direct object with the pronoun and placing it in the correct position. And this is wonderful. And we can have, 10 questions where it's la mela, it's il panino, it's spaghetti. And so you're varying the gender and number of that. And we can do that. But what we really want students to see, again, going back and thinking about our fundamentals, what is it that we want our students to walk away with, is we want them to understand that this is substitution of direct objects in general. And the only thing that changes is the gender and number. So you can ask them, indicate any other noun that could be substituted by the same direct object. So what else can la substitute? La can mean pizza, right? La can mean, help me out, I just lost it, pasta.
Yeah.
Yeah, la can be salad or insalata, so that it also gives them an opportunity to dip into their arsenal of vocabulary. So they can be, again, an opportunity for you as the instructor to verify their knowledge of vocabulary items as well. You can ask them to choose a thematic vocabulary item. So again, we want to make sure that the learning is as authentic and individualized as the students themselves, so that we really hit the marker of those transferable skills. So whether their learning outcome is to chat with nonna and do a recipe, or to go abroad and be the cicerone or the guide in Italy or wherever they need to be, they've met that learning outcome for themselves. So they see that high level and those, as we're suggesting here, critical thinking and problem solving skills.
So what I would like to add to, before we move on to the next of the presentation, is that this is, as you can see, the changing ever so slightly the perspective, but also being nimble and supple in our encounter with the students. So one last, for the fifth types, what I love to do is making students come up with their own assessment test questions. That takes quite a bit of higher order thinking, and I had students coming back to me feeling bad for me. They were saying, you have to do this all the time. We didn't know how hard it is to come up with the good questions. And I think it's based on the fact that I really truly believe the best way of learning is having to teach it. So again, we're not here to negate, we're not here to jump into using any tools that we have or any mediums that we have. We had a hard time coming up with the right words, because we don't want to minimize the AI to the level of tools, because it does have a potential, as you said in earlier survey. But we want to buy some time by focusing on what we do really, really well and what we can make them ready, so that when AI is integral part of our curriculum design, we don't lose the grip, we don't lose the control over it. So the next slide is basically the good takeaways. We wanted to open up this conversation that we've been having last 1.5 months to provoke questions. There was the series and hours of asking questions, because we believe at the end of the day, university education is all about helping students to ask good questions, the wonderful questions, and in the process of it, making meaning of their learning, and being purposeful. And some of the potential keywords, okay, for not only all of you wonderfully joining us and taking time and investing yourself to be part of this conversation, is in fact keep calm. Okay, but the next slide. No, not really. Don't keep calm. No, don't be passive. Don't keep calm. Okay,
it's okay if you're not calm. This is what we're trying to say. I mean, sometimes we get, right, Rosa? We get all of these, it'll be fine. Keep calm, just doing what you're doing. And we want to acknowledge that that's sort of glossing a bit over our experience. These are, as Rosa suggested, these are potentially paradigm shifting tools. I mean, when we hesitated with that term, didn't we, Rosa? With the term tool, because tool denotes something that is exterior to us and in our control, something that we've already met. But we recognize that potentially ChatGPT or generative AI has the potential to be paradigm shifting. And we don't want to minimize, what I know that many of us here on the call already intuit and understand. So we're asking, is that we just continue to be in that information gathering, knowledge gathering experience, and we give ourselves the time to contemplate these thought-provoking questions. So keep calm if that works for you. And if it doesn't, that's okay too, right? We don't want to dictate how others are feeling about, as we're both suggesting, this potentially paradigm shifting moment. But, what we want to do is understand that there are fundamentals, as hopefully we've suggested, and there are things that we can do. We can build on what we are, our collective experience and knowledge of what we already know. So trust yourself and your students, which hopefully that's something. Yeah.
Why it's very important in terms of building trust. Is a trust-based curriculum design versus the fear-based curriculum design will lead to two completely different outcomes. So I think we need to get out of the fear mode. And it was wonderful to see in all those words that you shared, there was much more positive than negative. Okay.
Yes.
And let's be purposeful in our design. What is your opening line of your teaching philosophy? This is one device that I have on my, so what did I say? What did I promise in my teaching dossier, teaching philosophy, that I see myself as this? And it's how my teaching, the actual interactions and communication with students reflect that view. And then we want to make sure that the TPO, the time and place and opportunity rules everything. So there will be time and there will be place and there will be opportunities where these AI mediums or tools will take a bigger place or less bigger place or some sort of a form will happen. Meanwhile, we know that we know best, so we don't need to rush in to do everything every time all at once. Right now, we're just trying to buy some time until we know more and we know better about these new partners or something else. Meanwhile, alignment. Okay, so the learning outcomes. Okay, also our learning outcomes, but also students' learning outcomes. Make sure that these are aligned with our assessment, and allow meditative time and space for transformational experience for all. That means including this space and time. We hope that this was that meditative and reflective time and space for all of you. And now the floor is open for questions. We have about 15 minutes to chat, if that's okay. And thank you, Mixie, and grazie to all of you for questions.
Merci beaucoup. Grazie. Okay, we got about 15. Oh, that was so